With his fishing rod in his hand, John paddled his canoe on a calm lake, looking at the water waiting to see movement of fish to catch. With the water gently rippling against the sides of his boat, like a boat, he calmed down until a threatening shape emerged beneath the surface. His heart raced and he turned pale when he realized what he was about to confront. As the mysterious creature drew nearer, John couldn't help but wonder if he'd ever make it back to shore. The creature was now almost very close to his boat. John could see how big the shadow actually was, and his stomach dropped. If he were to fall out of his canoe, he would never be able to pull himself up again in time. He paddled and paddled, but it seemed to be in vain. A creature bumped into his canoe with horrible strength. John could grab the sides just in time and was able to keep himself from falling out of the canoe, but his struggle was far from over. But what creature was terrorizing John? Why couldn't he get back to shore? And will he make it out? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. John was out on his canoe as he usually did during the weekends. He brought his fishing gear with him, trying to catch a fish. He had already been out on the lake for a few hours and had caught a fish or two when he decided to paddle a little further. And the lake was huge, and there were a lot of spots he hadn't fished in yet. He began to read his book, but quickly realized he couldn't keep his attention focused. He kept glancing at the water and at how deep and dark blue it looked. It began to feel a bit eerie, so he decided to head back to shore. But as he reeled in his rod, something began to change. John noticed how suddenly there began to form waves. John was very confused by this, as he was the only one on the lake. He quickly reeled in the rest of his rod and packed up his fishing gear. He had to paddle for at least 30 minutes to get back to shore. His body began to relax as he realized the shadow could have been from his canoe. He wasn't entirely sure if the shadow came from his canoe, but it had to. Right, there was no fish in this lake that big. His heart was still racing as he saw the shore again. It was now only a 15-minute paddle, or so he hoped. Then, something happened that he hoped wouldn't. The wind picked up and he felt little drops falling from the sky. Shit. John stopped paddling for a bit to catch his breath. He looked down into the water to see if it was getting any lighter again, indicating he was getting out of the deep part of the lake, but it wasn't. Well, the shore was now closer than ever, but John's strength was quickly fading. He sat back in his canoe, breathing heavily. Then, all of a sudden, the boat shook again. John could grab the side of the boat just in time, but his rod wasn't so lucky. It fell into the water, and John couldn't reach it anymore. It felt as if his whole world was ending. There was no way he would have enough strength to paddle all the way to shore, and if this strange creature swimming underneath him would bump his boat one more time, he would definitely fall out. A sudden urge for survival welled up inside John. He set his sight on one point on the shoreline and never looked away from it. Then, he began to paddle. He paddled as hard as he could, ignoring all his body's signals that were telling him to stop and give up. Realizing that brute force alone wouldn't cut it, John tried to remember all he'd learned about navigating difficult waters. He attempted to angle his canoe so that the wind would push him diagonally, a technique he'd once read about. His heart pounded in his chest as he put the technique to the test, feeling the canoe respond, albeit slowly, in the desired direction. No, John yelled, desperation evident in his voice. Panic set in the paddle was his lifeline, and now it was gone. With the weight of his decision pressing down on him, John mustered all his courage and plunged deeper into the pitch-black abyss. The rope tied to his ankle, fraying and old. It was his only lifeline back to the canoe. As the seconds ticked on, the deeper he went, the less light there was, and the world around him became a suffocating void. Gins, although he couldn't see anything, his instincts were clear he was being watched. In the oppressive darkness, John's eyes strained to make sense of his surroundings. Then, suddenly out of the edge of his limited vision, a dark form emerged, moving with an unsettling fluidity. Panic, raw and unyielding, surged through John. With his every instinct screaming danger, he kicked upwards. Barely breaking the surface, John gasped for breath, his lungs desperately drinking in the life-giving air. As his breathing steadied, John took in his surroundings. The familiar shoreline was now but a distant blur. Every ounce of energy John had expended in the water weighed him down now. His muscles ached, his fingers were numb, and his mind was clouded with fatigue. Heartened by these tales of survival, a newfound energy surged within John. He gripped the paddle with renewed determination, his strokes becoming more powerful and precise. As hours passed, John noticed a subtle shift in the water around him. The dark, ominous blue that once consumed his vision began to fade into a lighter, more welcoming shade. The afternoon sun cast a reflection, making it hard to discern the shape, but its swift approach was undeniable. John gripped the paddle, heart pounding, as he braced for what was next. The rippling vibrations sent shivers down his spine. The distance between him and the safety of the shoreline seemed vast, but John refused to let fear paralyze him. He raced against time in the lurking shadow beneath. Suddenly, the water erupted with a massive force. An enormous catfish, its scales glistening in the dimming sunlight, breached the surface. Its sheer size was awe-inspiring as it twisted and thrashed, creating waves that rocked the canoe violently. John could scarcely believe his eyes. With the shore tantalizingly close and the memory of the giant catfish fresh in his mind, John made a split-second decision. Abandoning the canoe, he leapt into the shallower waters. With powerful strides, he pushed through, the sandy bottom beneath his feet offering some reassurance. Finally, his feet met solid ground and he staggered onto the shore, collapsing onto the sandy beach. His breaths came in ragged gasps. As John began his trek back home, the lake glistened under the twilight. Every step away was accompanied by a glance back at the deceptive calm of the waters. What was once a place of solace and recreation had shown him its wild, unpredictable nature. And upon reaching his home, John's wearied state didn't go unnoticed by his family. The blend of exhaustion, shock, and relief painted on his face raised immediate concern. His clothes were still damp, and his hair matted to his forehead. "John, what happened?" his sister exclaimed, rushing over to him. His mother, with worry in her eyes, gently took his arm and guided him inside. They enveloped him, offering warmth both physically and umbilically, stabilizing his shaking world. As night settled, John, surrounded by his closest family members and friends, began to recount the day's harrowing events. Gasps of horror, sighs of relief, and soft murmurs filled the room as John shared his ordeal, offering them a glimpse into the unpredictable heart of the lake. The following days were marked by John's burning need for answers. While the incident had traumatized him, it had also sparked an insatiable curiosity. He needed to understand what he had witnessed in the vast depths of the lake. Turning to old journals, books, and online databases, John began his research in earnest, searching for any information that could shed light on the enigmatic giant he had encountered. John soon found himself immersed in the history of the lake. Old records painted a picture of a lake with profound depths, caverns, and underground channels that had remained largely unexplored. While speaking to a local historian, John stumbled upon an old photograph. It depicted a secluded building nestled on the lake's edge, stamped with the logo of a renowned research institution. The image was captioned Lakeside Lab, 1978. John's heart raced as he made the connection. Could this lab, almost hidden in plain sight, hold the answers he sought? With determination, John found the now abandoned facility, overgrown with vegetation but still standing. Inside, amidst dusty papers and derelict equipment, he discovered a trove of research notes. As he sifted through the yellowed pages, John's eyes widened with each revelation. Delving deeper, John came across a specific project labeled Project Leviathan. Here, it was outlined how researchers had taken ordinary catfish and genetically altered their DNA. They aimed to increase their size for what seemed to be commercial purposes. There were even photographs of baby catfish in petri dishes, growing juveniles in tanks, and a haunting image of a massive catfish, its size inconceivable. He pondered if the lab's experiments were responsible for unbalancing the lake's ecosystem and the creature that chased him that fateful day. John knew he couldn't keep these findings to himself, but the community, and perhaps even the wider world, needed to know. Determined to expose the lab's activities and the potential risks of their experiments, he began meticulously gathering every piece of evidence. John compiled the photographs, research notes, and the data from Ernest into a comprehensive report. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he approached local newspapers and TV stations, presenting them with the irrefutable evidence of the lab's disturbing experiments. A prominent journalist took interest, helping John organize a press conference to expose the entire operation to the public and demand answers from those responsible. Once the news broke, the community was in an uproar. The peaceful, serene lake, a beloved local spot, had been turned into an experimental playground, putting everyone at risk. As a result of the revelations and the public's demand for action, local authorities swiftly moved to quarantine the lake. A thorough investigation was launched, targeting not just the current activities but delving into the lab's historical operations. Months passed and the impassioned debates began to wane. The barriers around the lake remained, but children once again played at its edges and local vendors set up stalls nearby. Yet, a tangible sense of trepidation persisted. Old fishermen exchanged tales of the lake's dark days. The community's sentiments were divided, and the decision was left to a council of experts, local leaders, and representatives from guardians of the lake. And it's a tale of the giant catfish became more than just a story. It evolved into a lesson imprinted in the heart of the community. Parents narrated it to their children, emphasizing the significance of respecting nature's boundaries. Local schools included it in their curriculum, molding it into a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of unchecked scientific experiments. And the giant catfish's legacy served as a reminder of humanity's duty to tread lightly upon the earth. Seated on his porch, overlooking the lake, John often pondered the intricate dance between man and nature. He realized that every technological advancement came with its shadows, and every stride forward needed introspection. In his journal, he penned his final thoughts: nature isn't merely a resource to exploit, but a relationship to nurture. We are but fleeting guests on this earth, and our actions echo in its vastness. It's our duty to ensure that this echo is harmonious, not discordant, This reflective note concluded John's tumultuous yet transformative journey,